Hi, everybody.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
So, we are here on the third day of our celebration for the Immersive Trails fourth anniversary. And we are doing a session with Anmol, who presently is working with Immersive Trails, and Pritha, who was actually the first person to join the team after Chelsea and Totagota. And we're going to have a discussion with them and talk about their journey. But before that, um, we'll give about a minute or two so that people can join in, and then we'll get started with the introductions. If you have any questions or if you want to know anything from Anmol or from Preetha, then please leave them in the comment box in Facebook or YouTube or wherever you are watching. All right, let's begin. So, Preetha, would you like to first introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone watching this. I'm Pritha. I worked at Heritage Walk Calcutta, now Immersive Trails, since I think 2017 till 2019. After that, I am not working. I'm studying at Rutgers University, doing a PhD in art history. So I'm back in Calcutta for a break in the midst of this pandemic, and I'm glad I'm here for the anniversary celebrations.
Thank you for joining us, Preetha, and making the time to talk to us about your experience. Anmol, would you like to follow it up with your introduction?
Yes. My name is Anmol and I work with Immersive Trails as a consulting architect. So I joined them back in 2019 when while Preeta was still at the company, just a couple of months before she left. And I had initially joined for the Mess Party project, and Preeta was actually one of our mentors for that project. And she really helped us interns sort of just go about with the work that we were doing. And of course, she was also leading walks at the time, so I also had the chance of going on the last walk that she conducted before she left for her PhD. And since then, of course, the company has now rebranded to Immersive Trails, and we're starting to go pan India and eventually global as well. So I feel like it's been quite a journey in the past 2 years, and I think this session is perfect to kind of wrap it all together because Preeta knows exactly how it was when it started, and I can give a more present day context. So, really excited for this session. Yeah.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Anmol. So we're going to go deeper into both your experiences, but I think it's always good to start with a little bit of like a bird's eye view. And so I'd love to know from both of you, maybe starting with you, Preetha, because you joined first and you have had more time to retrospect. But what has been what for you has been the highlight, or what has stayed with you after working with Immersive Trails, or what has been your key takeaway?
Um, that question requires a very long answer, but I'll try to keep it short. Um, I think every time I meet Tathagatha and Chelsea and Anmol and other members of the team, so I always realize that our ethics have never changed. And I'm so proud and glad of that, like our effort to do community engagement actively has not changed. And that's like something that I remember when I'm planning out my fieldwork for my PhD. And so that's something that I still remember, and I know I'm very proud of the company for that. Other than that, I also remember that working, and this is a very personal highlight. But working at Heritage Walk Calcutta slash Immersive Trails actually helped me get rid of my stage fright. I don't know about Anmol, how it has been. Your experience leading walks, of course, we are right now in the middle of pandemic. I attended one of Anmol's virtual walks, I think, a couple of months back. And uh, I think that was one of my biggest takeaways on a personal level. Uh, but yes, also did a lot of projects. We went to Exeter to actually start up this idea of going global, doing something on a much larger scale, taking this model forward. And that was right when like the this was February 2019, I think, and we were just starting to like visualize how it would look like. And it's so exciting to like see Anmol and then Tathagata and Chelsea also work towards that goal now.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, stage fright is something that we all suffer from, and I'm so glad that you got over it because we always hear so much about your walks, and even now it's remembered by a lot of people. So we are very glad that you got over your stage fright. So, Anmol, do you want to follow it up with your highlights? I mean, you still work with Immersive Trails, but in the last 2 years, like you said, it has been quite a journey. So, we'd love to know what your highlights have been.
Yes. So I think the number one biggest highlight for myself at a personal level has that working with Immersive Trails has really made me fall in love with the city of Kolkata. Now, I'm not sure if most people are aware, but I'm not from here. So, although my parents were from Calcutta, they moved to Chennai after they got married, permanently moved to Chennai, and I've been born and brought up there. So we decided to make the move back only 4 years ago, about 4.5 years in 2016. And of course, moving away from home at that time was a very, very big deal. So I still remember the first year I decided to take a gap year because the year we moved, I had just finished my bachelor's in architecture. And when we came here, I was doing a couple of things, but I was just very disconnected from the city because I just did not want to be here. And I thought I was familiar with the city because we did have family even before we moved, and we would keep visiting, when we were kids and things like that. But I just did not want to be here at all, and I wanted to run back to Chennai any chance I got. So it was only actually after I completed my masters and came back, and when I happened to see an opening for a documentation project with Immersive Trails, I applied, I got in, and honestly those 2 months were completely life changing because it was, you really had to get down to the ground level because you had to go out essentially in North Kolkata, which is known to be extremely confusing because if any of you are familiar, it's essentially a maze of it's a maze, and it's very easy to get lost if you don't know your way around. So my parents were actually apprehensive of letting me do that project because they said, we ourselves don't know that part of the city, how are you going to be able to navigate? But I mean, I was extremely lucky that I had a wonderful team to work with, and of course we had mentors like Tatakozada, Chelsea and Preeta who were also helping us. So they made it so easy, and also attending the walks, I feel like it just opened up so much more about the city that I just absolutely did not know about at all. And I feel like now, by conducting walks of my own and also by furthering research into the city itself, I feel like I'm almost giving back. So it's like a circle wherein I also have that power now to make other people actually fall in love with the city. And I think the biggest takeaway for me by doing these things has been when people come to my walks and tell me things like, we've seen these buildings since for all our lives, we've lived in these places, but we didn't know anything of what you just told us. So I think that in itself is very, very powerful, that it's definitely not easy, but if you really want to go for it, you can actually really dive deep into a city and do justice to it. And apart from that, if I can mention another highlight very, very quickly, it's just the fact that we've been able to make this leap, and especially at a time like the pandemic, when most businesses, when most people, most organizations were running at a loss, when most people were going out of business, but we were actually able to innovate and sustain ourselves and actually come out the other end even bigger than we were before. And I will not credit that to us at present because this has been in the making. Like Preeta said, they were sowing the seeds for going global much before the pandemic, so in 2019, a year before the pandemic actually hit. And I feel like because we already had that thought that we really wanted to do something, we wanted to set ourselves apart, we didn't want to be just another tour company. I feel like that sort of hindsight has really helped us a lot in actually charting the way forward, and in coming out successful, in even though we've had to deal with this pandemic. So I feel like those two have been the biggest highlights for me up till now.
That's great to hear. I mean, it definitely is exciting to see how much the boundaries have blurred because of the pandemic, and that um, we were Immersive Trails was able to sort of make use, despite the immense difficulties that were faced, we were able to make good on going global. But Preetha, I'd like to understand a little more, and then Anmol, maybe you can also talk about it. When you talk about going global, the vision that Immersive Trails has towards making history accessible, how do you think that gets translated into a global environment? I mean, what are the projects that you worked on, Preetha? And then Anmol, maybe you can talk about what you are planning now, now that the pandemic has taken a different face almost.
I would say I hadn't personally started working as such on a project. I remember that so we went to the University of Exeter. We got some training in business and thinking of how much we could start with, how sustainably, and then what would the future steps be. And I think we started working with small organizations in Sri Lanka. If I'm not wrong, Anmol, correct me. I have this is from 2 years back, so I'm very scared of getting my facts wrong. Uh, but I remember that the model of making sure that the walks are accessible, most importantly by locals, that they have the locals' consent and involvement, that they are done by people who are genuinely interested in making history in all its facets, in all the ways that it can be represented, be very to be involved. Make sure fact checking is an important thing. So all these seeds of how a walk for us, just say my Chitpur walk, how we would do that. Our idea was to implement it in different places where people would not necessarily have an access to these experiential walks. Like if you go to say Mumbai or Delhi, I would personally like to go on a walk like this. And I had looked for walks in say Pune and other cities I visited in India, and it was hard to find walks that were accessible by the general public who did not know, who did not have connections. So I think going virtual and making sure that the social media was also up and running was also important for us. And I think we also worked with a couple of consulates here in Calcutta. That was my exposure to how people were perceiving our city and maybe what we could do better to make sure that unknown facets of the city was shown, that it was not just, to be honest, Victoria Memorial and Howrah Bridge and Kalighat Temple. I mean, they are really important, but there are more stories to be told about them and about other parts of the city. So I think that's the model we were going for. And I think where it has reached now, and more can say better.
Anmol, do you want to continue that?
Yeah. So as Preeta said, I mean, we were thinking of ways in which we can take our walks virtual and just make it more. The idea behind it was not virtual per se, but just to make it more accessible to people, because we also had issues even while we were doing physical walks prior to the pandemic, where people had accessibility issues in the sense that there were people who would not be able to walk that distance. They would not be able to keep up with the rest of the group. And just I remember we also used to have a lot of people come on the walks who were not staying in India. So essentially NRIs, people who were coming back to their hometown, and they would say things like, our parents would talk about these places, our parents would frequent these places, and they always sort of felt very bad that they could not share this experience with their parents, simply either because they couldn't travel all the way, and or they may not be able to, they may have mobility issues and things like that. So I feel like our main idea was to mitigate that. But of course, with the pandemic, we realized that going virtual was the best way for that moment. But what we also didn't expect is the kind of response that we got. So, I mean, the response we got was absolutely overwhelming. And as Preeta said, our main goal back then, even today, is to make sure that we reach out to the locals first. So, we want the locals to participate before anybody else. And with our physical walks, we always had a higher percentage of people from Kolkata actually who used to visit, who used to come on our walks. And even on our virtual walks, actually, it's not that that number has diminished. We still get locals who come on our walks. We've actually had people who had already attended those physical walks and who came back for the virtual experience, simply because we weren't trying to replicate the physical experience, but we were just trying to create something new, with the starting with the material that we already had, but then of course building on it. So I feel like in doing that, we've actually managed to come up with something that is quite immersive. I wouldn't say it is 100% replication of a physical experience, because of course that's absolutely impossible, but I would say that this is a different experience in itself. So you can't substantiate one with the other, you can't replace one with the other. And also I just I feel like with also we have been trying to formulate the Immersive Trails Academy as well, wherein we want to reach out to students, because we know that in most cases, at least in India, especially at the undergraduate level, a lot of students are not taught skills related to the community. So they're not taught how to actually do a study, or just essentially connect with the communities. And they're also not particularly taught on how to connect at a global level, so how to connect interculturally with people coming from different backgrounds, from different countries and things like that. So I think we had a chance to sort of experiment with that, with all of the programs that we've done with the University of Exeter, because we've done now, I think, 3 programs with them already. We have another one coming up, wherein students from India have really gotten that chance to interact with students from the UK and vice versa. And that has enriched, students on both sides. So I think those are the 2 ways in which we are currently working towards going global. Of course, we have gotten a lot of other university collaborations as well. But in terms of what we're doing now, it's essentially just to make experiences from all over the world accessible to people everywhere. Because although travel is opening up, although the world is opening up now, I mean, travel still isn't back to how it would be, and travel will, we feel, never be the same again. So, it's just making sure that these experiences are available for whoever wants them to take up at any point of time.
And I think that's a very valid point you've raised, Anmol, that I think these experiences go beyond the purview of travel or tourism, and that the fact that we're using them to inform students or to inform even people who might not fall under the definition of a student, but who might still want to learn and who want to access history in their city. For example, you, Anmol, you fell in love with Kolkata, and then Pritha, who is now gone on to study art history. So keeping that in mind, I'd love to know, how what do you think is is the value. So because you have studied architecture, and you, Prita, are now studying art history, what do you think is the value of an immersive experience done virtually for a student of any of the topics, say art history or any social sciences? Because a lot of times now we get to hear that virtual education cannot replace physical, like face to face education, and it's lower in value. But of course, we are surpassing boundaries over here. We are opening up new opportunities, and especially with Immersive Trails Academy, we are going to be able to offer to not just students, but to, like I said, people who are not students, an opportunity to learn. So I'd love to know from both of you what your idea or what your thinking is behind virtual experiences and how they can help students.
Um, I think that one of the best things I ever did with Immersive Trails was do this workshop with young children from all over West Bengal. It was called Future There. It was about sustainability, and most of the panels were on sustainability with regards to environment. And we always see environment as something very different and away from culture. For some reason, you never really study cultural conservation or eco-cultural conservation ever during our environmental studies, which we used to learn by rote and just vomit it out on our exam sheets. But I remember doing that, and I realized that children are interested. They were very interested in actually talking about what the municipal corporation and what our government's heritage laws were, what we could do to kind of, how should I say, modify them to suit the needs of our buildings and communities better, because a lot of the buildings were stuck in gridlocks, legal gridlocks, interfamily issues, and it's very difficult to find funding for something that's in a gridlock. You can't really do anything with that space, with that site. And I always thought that actually educating a younger generation through workshops, at least start like heritage clubs in the school. And to be honest, that's not enough. We need to understand that oh, it's just some social sciences thing. It's fine. We don't really need to bother ourselves with that. And having come from doing an undergrad in chemistry to doing history and then art history, I understand the value of knowing what's around you and where you come from. It's such a disjointed experience not to know who the people around me are, what the buildings around me are. Uh, but I wish like I had something like that when I was in school. So I'm really glad that Immersive Trails is doing that. Also, when I was applying for um, my PhD, I had no one to look to for advice. So Tathavtada and Chelsea actually helped me a lot. And I'm sure they can help others a lot too. I know a lot of people who actually want to do PhD in social sciences and humanities. There's a lot more guidance there out for STEM students. And I really think we need that. So I don't know if there are plans in the making, but this is my appeal for those plans to happen. So I don't know. So we does that answer your question?
It does in a way, because that's really at the root of what I was getting at, which is that how immersive experiences add a lot of value in learning, which is what you have spoken about in terms of how children responded to the immersive experiences that you curated for them. And now that we're doing it with virtual as well. So, for example, tomorrow we start with a global hackathon with Exeter University. Wherein over a period of a month we are going to train certain students in creating immersive experiences. So I'd love to hear from Anmol as well, how while Pritha spoke about the physical experiences and how immersively they helped children in learning, I'd love to hear from Anmol how the experience has been with virtual experiences.
Yeah, so I feel like starting from my school days, history was a subject that was not particularly liked by any of us simply because it was just based on rote learning. Like Preeta was talking about, environmental studies. So unless you had a really good teacher who could make history come alive, it's just about remembering a bunch of names, a bunch of dates, and that's about it. And unfortunately, the same thing happened in college as well. Now, I studied architecture, and architecture is all about experiencing spaces. So, I mean, you can't really expect someone to actually learn about these spaces and really sort of dive deep into the ideation process that went on behind the creation of these spaces by just looking at some pictures and just looking at a book and just looking at some words strung together. So I wish, that virtual experiences had been around at that point of time, wherein, we would be able to travel to different sites of importance across India, and where we would have been actually able to experience these places in that sense, because I feel like that would have really sort of enriched our learning experience and given us a more 360 sort of learning experience in that sense. And like, for instance, we went on a tour. So typically, architecture students are taken on a study tour at least once during the duration of their course. We were also taken on one. But I feel like, when, especially if you're visiting spaces for the first time, it can be quite overwhelming. So you don't really look into the details. You're just so caught up with how the building looks like on the outside that you don't try to go beyond it. But with virtual experiences, I feel like you have that time and you're able to give proper attention to everything. Like, even if I am to relate that with the kind of virtual experiences that we offer, so most of the virtual experiences that we offer are experiences that we used to offer physically as well, so our physical walks and tours. But even then, people told us that, we felt like we attended something completely different, simply because there's so much more information that you can give. So in a sense, you can now give them audio video, you can show them audio video, or like audio visual material. And that, I feel like, is taking it one step beyond, because when you're physically in a space, there's only so much that you can actually do. Although you can also get a sense of space there, I feel like if you do things virtually, you just have that little bit more time to absorb everything. So it's just about that. It's just about sort of absorbing everything, so that it you have a better understanding in your mind. And I feel like that is what virtual experiences really helps with.
Absolutely. I mean, I have attended some of the workshops with Immersive Trails, and I definitely personally, I never got a chance to study history in a meaningful way. And with Immersive Trails, I was able to at least get an introduction in how to do oral history, or how to approach oral history, I would say, which was very valuable for me. But moving on from the virtual experiences, there is another theme that you both have spoken about, and that I'd love to delve into, because I know that it's a very important part of Immersive Trails' work, which is community engagement and interacting with locals in an ethical way. And this is something that I hear a lot from Tautagata and Chelsea and Anmol. But Pritha, I'd love to hear from you. What was the seedling, or what was the how was it in the initial days? How did you ensure that there was always consent, and that there was an ethical underlying ethical principles that were followed while creating the experiences that you did?
So what were all the walks that we did were mostly in so-called public spaces. Now, in Calcutta, or I would say in many different places, the idea of public and private, sometimes the boundaries are blurred. So there might be temples that are accessible to people, but they are in someone's houses. And yes, you can say that, oh, I'm here just to see a public temple. Why do I need to talk to anyone of the members of the family or something? But that's actually, I would say, not the way to do it. At the end of the day, it's people who have like lived there for ages, who know way more about the place than we probably do. So they're amazing to talk to kind of they're actually our sources, as you would say. And it's very important to get consent if you're like going there early morning. To be honest, a bunch of random strangers, right? We are all strangers. Our walks have like different new faces every time. And it was very important, me as a walk leader. Chikpur Road is really busy. So my walk started from Bagh Bazaar. we we used to start from like literally a section of the pavement, give our spiel there, then go on to see like log gates and everything. But it was important for us to like, there were people living there, living in the log gate area. There were the people in the tea stalls. uh, there were caretakers of the temple. There were even people at the sweet shops that we stopped at for refreshments. And you could have not talked to them. You could have just said, this should be public access. Why should we need to talk? And no, that's not how you do it. So it was very important us to actually go and make sure that the people who were in those spaces were comfortable with us going there. And that happens initially, people will be like, okay, yeah, sure, this is like, yeah, you can, it's fine. But then I remember that everyone from the company keeps telling me that people on the walk on my route actually uh, ask about me. And this might sound like bragging, but I really am glad that I did that, and that I remember their names and I know about their families. I mean, it's good to have like a rapport with the people with whom you're also working. Like, we think that we are not working with them, we are just doing a walk. We are actually working with them. We are working with them to make sure that the spaces are welcome, that the spaces, that we know more about the spaces, not just the history but what's happening right now, because they often have more information than we do. They live there 24/7. um, Also, I just went to Chinatown and ate at Savoy with my father. And Mr. Lee is so great to talk to every time I go there. And I would never have known about Savoy, the temple, the new restaurant, if I had not worked with Immersive Trails and if they had not done community engagement. The fact that they did community engagement is the reason that all these relationships kind of fell into place. So I think that's how I saw it in the initial days. And I think it's kind of continued till now.
Absolutely. Anmol, would you like to add to that?
Yes. So I think I can completely resonate with everything that Preeta has said because, engaging with the local community and just being clear about what we are doing, about being straightforward with them is the number one thing that we are taught is that you should absolutely not lie to them. You should tell them what you're doing because they also need to be aware because in most cases we are working in their neighborhood. So, I mean, we have no right to go there and do our work if especially if it's not appreciated without the help from the community. And just actually this morning I was walking down my stretch, the Chorangi stretch where I used to lead my walk, and I crossed the tea stall where we typically used to stop for tea, and the chaiwala actually called out to me even though I was wearing a mask. So he recognized me and he actually called out to me and he asked me how I was. And I feel like that is so important, like Preeta said, developing these relationships because these people oftentimes have so much to add. And it's just, it gives you also that sense of security and it gives you that sense of the fact that you're welcome in their space because this is essentially their space, this is not our space. Although we may say, as she said, we might think these as public spaces, but for them this is their private space. And just like just following their wishes because I'm sure Preeta would also agree that there are numerous buildings in the city which you're not allowed to photograph simply because people don't want them photographed for whatever reason. But you have to respect their wishes as well, especially when we're on walks. Now when people attend our walks, they love taking pictures everywhere, but we are very clear with them that there are certain structures that you're not able to photograph, so please do respect their wishes. And like especially on one of my walks there was a time when the security guard wouldn't even let us stand and talk in front of that building simply because he just did not want us there. But when we kept going back, he kept seeing us, we sort of kept building that trust, and we made sure that nobody in our group, whichever group we were taking, nobody broke that trust. So after a point he would actually come out, he would come out and speak to us and speak to members of the group and things like that. So I think it's just essentially not invading someone else's space and knowing where to draw our limits, and just being clear about what we're doing. And even if, there are so many times when we're out on our explorations, when we're taking pictures, especially in the neighborhoods of North Kolkata, where the roads are quite narrow and everyone knows each other in the community. It's a very close knit community, so if you are an outsider, everyone is going to know that you're not from there. So when you go into these sort of spaces, and if you are photographing buildings, now if it's a public road, in most cases you can photograph most of the buildings. But if somebody comes up to you and asks you, what you're doing, they don't expect you to snap back at them. So the best way to go about it, how we respond to it, is that we actually tell them what we're doing, and we tell them why we're photographing these buildings and why it's important. And we feel like, that actually helps them also inculcate a sense of pride, because in most cases they would actually be, walking past these buildings every day, and they might not even give them a second look. But when they see us actually talking about the importance of these buildings, that's when they also start inculcating that sense of pride, that we have so much of history, and we actually have so much of culture in our own neighborhoods. And another thing that I would like to add, just to sort of end this, is that a lot of people talking about heritage now. The thing, I feel like, at least in Calcutta, I'm not sure particularly how it works in other cities, but some people are quite touchy about their properties. So there are certain properties where they will not let you enter. And like, we know of certain people who pride themselves on actually going into these spaces without permission, and just to get that one photograph, or just to get that little bit of some sort of something to just kind of add on, to kind of add to their repertoire or something like that. But I don't think that's the right way to actually go about doing things like this, because you need to respect the wishes. Now, if somebody tells you that this is my space, we don't want you to enter, you need to respect that. It doesn't matter if, if there's if there's a treasure trove inside, but you need to sort of respect that. And if you show that respect, I feel like one day down the line, they will definitely invite you into their space, and they'll actually open up and give you so much more than you would have found had you just sort of walked into that space without permission. So I feel like it's all just about respecting boundaries. That's pretty much it.
That makes a lot of sense, Anmol, because whenever I have thought about the work that Immersive Trails is doing, I'm very grateful that it, to be a little harsh, but like, it's taking voyeurism out of tourism, which has now become so much a part of it, that just looking at something, just looking at certain people, that's not what experiencing a place is about. It's about interacting with the local community and making, being a part of their life and making them a part of yours. So um, I completely resonate with what you're saying when it comes to ethical exploration. But at the same time, I think this does bring up a question that yesterday during Chelsea and Totogota's live session, they spoke about why they got into immersive trails, and it's been a difficult, it's a difficult thing to explain to those around you why you are doing this, because it's not exactly, you cannot call it conventional tourism, you cannot call it conventional history, and also the understanding of social sciences is so for the lack of better word, it's so shallow in our country. So what about you both? How did you both make peace with the fact that you are working here, or help others around you understand what you're doing, and if they have now understood, or yeah, I'd just love to know what pushed you to get into it, and then how did you help others around get, and how did it affect your life? I mean, you have told me how it affected your life, but I'd love to know how you would, how you got into it, and how you explained it to others. um and Pritha, you can start, I guess.
Sure. Um, it's a very heavy question, because as a South Asian kid, I think everyone kind of realizes how hard it is to not study science and then go to history and then tell your parents one fine day that, hey, I'm going to be a walk leader. And they're like, what? You're going to be a tour guide? And I'm like, yeah, you can say that. And first of all, being a woman, coming from a science background, coming from a very conventional middle class Bengali background, this is, I would say this is not acceptable. This was not acceptable at one point of time. And it was very hard to like make people understand that I was not doing this for fun, that this was not a filler for my time. Oh, I'm just going to do this until I go do something better. This has actually been one of my best hands-on experiences that I know for a fact has helped me in my field work, in my personal daily lives also. And it took a long time to actually make people understand that uh, studying the history of a place, like people would ask me, why are you studying old things? Like, move on. And I'm like, sure, I would move on, but we are still part of that narrative. Like, however much we might like think that, oh, today it's the 14th of February, 2021. I don't really need to know about 1921, 14th of February. Uh, we still have events in our colonial past, post colonial past, and events in ancient past, for God's sake, that are being brought up every day and that we deal with even like without us consciously thinking about it, to be honest. And it's very important to kind of situate yourself in history, like where exactly you are and how exactly we reached here, so that we can kind of like either better it or understand where we are coming from and not fight with people about difference of opinions and have some logical standing. But it was really difficult actually, trying to convince people that this was a legitimate way of making my way in the world. That everyone was like, why aren't you doing a PhD? I'll be honest. Everyone was asking me, hey, why are you wasting your time? And I'm like, dude, this is literally what you would consider work experience. Be This is professionally my work experience. So I think this is, I won't say this is just another job, but yes, at the end of the day, this is as important as any other job as I have done. So I think this profession is sometimes looked down upon. And I know how hard it has been for Tathagatuda and Chelsea both, because we are always questioned like about even our credentials, like, oh, are you really doing that? If you are so well studied, if you're like, if you know so much, why are you stuck here and why are you doing this? Why not something better? And I'm like, because when we go and we do something else, I always get the question, so what are you actually doing for the community? What are you actually doing for the society? I'm like, no one will let you live wherever you go. There will always be questions about your choices. And I consciously made the choice to do this. So I'm very happy. I think my parents are very proud of me for being able to wake up at like 6 or 5 in the morning. They thought I would drop out like after 2 months, to be honest. So they were like, oh my God, we don't believe this. Who is this? This is not our child. But that was my experience. It still is difficult. I would say it's still not a cakewalk. Um, but I think we just have to stick with it. Like, we just have to keep doing it, making sure that people are familiar with our work, so that every time relatives would ask questions, why do you do this, I would answer them. I would not ignore them, and I would keep answering them so that I could like kind of condition them into believing and accepting that this is legit. So I don't know, that was very deep and very impersonal, but that was my experience, to be honest.
No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It makes a lot of sense because um, even I face a lot of trouble explaining what I do, and I find a lot of value in what you said, that you have to keep explaining, that you can't give up and say that these people will never understand. That you have to keep trying to explain, um, but without taking it to heart when they don't. So I think that's very valuable, and thank you for sharing your journey. Anmol, what about you? How was it for you?
Yeah, so it has also, it still is quite hard for me as well, because most of my friends do not understand what I'm doing, because essentially I'm not designing buildings, and that's what my job description says, that I am an architect, so hence I should be designing buildings. But I feel like so during my undergraduate study, we were never really exposed to doing research. The first time that I was actually exposed to doing proper ethical research, so in a sense, not plagiarizing, not copying anything of Wikipedia or anything of Google, is when I went for my master's, which I feel like is still very, very later on in life. Because, now when I actually look back at what I did, the papers that I wrote during my master's, I feel like I could have done so much better had I just even done maybe a 2 month internship with Immersive Trails, had I, like, before I went for my master's. Because I feel like, people don't really give that sort of attention that research needs in India. And I feel like it has to come from the ground level up. It has to come from when you're in school, because unfortunately, in most schools, they follow rote learning. So you just have to sort of paraphrase what's given in your textbooks and just spit it out on your, on your exam sheets and things like that. And that was at least my experience in when I was doing my undergraduate study as well. So after I got that initial experience of doing research during my masters, when I joined Immersive Trails, I felt like this was such a nice way of making. So actually, I'm talking about now when I'm already working with Immersive Trails, but even when I had chosen to study architecture all the way back in 2010, 2011, I still remember so many people were like, "What is architecture?" Even while I was studying, they're like, "Wait, so what are you doing?" They used to ask me, "Are you an architecture?" Not, "Are you an architect?" So, even that thing of the profession itself was not very well recognized. Of course, today it is more widely recognized and people know what it is. But I feel like, there's still sort of a disconnect. People don't exactly know how wide architecture is, because essentially it is a design field, and there are numerous things that you can do once is if you're in any design course. Like, your opportunities are absolutely endless, and I feel like what I'm doing is one of that. Now, unfortunately, the fact that we run tours, so that brings us under the bracket of the tourism industry. But I feel like we are so much more than that, because I feel like our specialty is the fact that we are researchers from so many different fields that have actually come together to make these tours. So it's not your run of the mill tour that you would do in any place. It's actually essentially the research that you are passionate about doing, making that accessible to a general public. Because today, if I was to hand over my thesis to my parents or my sister or even my friends who are architects, I don't think most of them would actually understand what it says. But if I can convert that to sort of an experience like a walking tour or a workshop or something like that, they would just understand it so much better. So I feel like this is such a great way of furthering research into the areas where it's lacking, into the areas that you are really interested in, and just making everybody understand, from a school student to your parents, to someone even older than them, and things like that. And I really, really resonated with something that Preeta said, that so when my father met Tatakotada and Chelsea, he actually told them that, "I honestly know that Anmol is very, very passionate about what she's doing, because she actually wakes up early in the morning, because I am not a morning person at all." And I think he said this to them both times that he's met them. So, that is something that he sees as, something. And even I think that that is a very, very big thing, because even if I haven't gotten any sleep the previous night, I am going to wake up in the morning and I am going to go, because this is what I love doing. So I feel like, it's just expanding the horizon actually, and really broadening the meaning of what really a walking tour is, or what an experience is in essential. And just, people shouldn't think that they have to limit themselves. So this, like, I know that Tatakuta wants what he's doing now to serve as an example to other students of archaeology in the country and elsewhere, that you don't have to stick to conventional archaeology. This is also something that you can do. And I sort of want to follow that example, and reach out to other students of architecture and tell them that it's not only about always thinking about the future, because unfortunately that's what's sort of drilled into our heads when we're in architecture school, that only think of the future, green building, sustainable building, this, that, all of that. But there's no connect with the past, and I feel like you cannot forge a way ahead without actually thinking of the past and giving it its due. So I feel like, I want this to just sort of serve as an example to them, that this is also something you can explore if you do enjoy doing research, and that you don't have to go into academics, you don't have to, say, become a professor or something like that. You can also do this, which is a lot of fun. So yeah, so that's just how my experience has been, and I'm absolutely grateful to have parents who, who are willing to support me, and who are also very proud of what I do. And like my mother, she's extremely active on the Immersive Trails on our Facebook page. My father is very active on Twitter, so they both keep sharing, they keep commenting and doing things like that, and that makes me so happy to see, the fact that they do support what I'm doing. And even though it has taken time, they do understand what I'm doing, and that's all that matters, the fact that they are able to understand and they support us in whatever we do. So
That's 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 great to hear that. I mean, parents eventually do come around, and that they're now a part of your journey. Um, there is a question that we have from Abhishek Day in the comments. Anmol, I think you can probably answer this. So he's asking, does Immersive Trail wish to create a public platform as an exchange program for ideas as seed of change towards local development on ground?
hmm. So I think that is definitely something that we can look towards. So typically how we sort of go about our projects in the present day and age is that, of course, we get a proposal from an organization, and then there is a collaborative effort. So we work along with the organization to actually work on these projects. Like, for example, if I talk about the Ghats of Kolkata project, now the Ghats are one of the most important parts of the city of Calcutta, but very, very, very under researched, unfortunately. So we, working with the Living Waters Museum, we're trying to kind of understand their perspective. We're trying to add our perspective as well. And there are also a couple of other organizations that Living Waters Museum is in touch with. So we are trying to get in a lot of different feedback from different groups, of just to kind of form a much better opinion of what really has to be done. But at the moment, we don't really have a platform for it, though I think this is a great idea. So, definitely maybe we can discuss this sometime soon and see how we can go about setting that up. Because even like on a lot of the other projects that we've done, the Mess Party project that we had done, when we came out with the report, even when we were active on social media during the project, we got so many, so many requests from people that, is there a way where we can donate? Is there a way where we can help out and things like that? So that definitely, I mean, I feel like people are sort of itching to participate, and maybe this is something that we can facilitate in the near future, is that we have a platform where we essentially form some sort of a collective wherein people can actually really come and pool their resources together. But I feel like why we've been sort of holding back on this for a while is because we don't just want to be all talk. Because unfortunately, what we have seen in Calcutta and in the rest of India is that, in most cases, when it's always only that there are these massive discussions that are happening and then nothing ends up happening. And we don't want to kind of add on to that. We actually really want to do something concrete. So I think if we put a little bit of thought into this, then definitely this can definitely be done. And this is a great idea. So thank you, Abhishek. I'm sure Tatakotada and Chelsea are both listening to this. We already have Surbhi here. So, we can definitely discuss this sometime soon and see if we can work on this as well.
Absolutely. It is actually a great idea. So thank you, Abhishek. I think we are almost at time, but just to close the session, I'd love to hear from both of you, maybe starting with you, Pritha. Where do you think, or where do you want to see immersive trails in, say, the near future, say 4 or 5 years, seeing where, having an insight into the journey of what has happened and knowing where we are now, where do you think, or where do you want us to immersive trails to be in the near future?
Firstly, I want people to start accepting that we are here to stay. Second, uh, I mean, I always say we, even though I'm not officially part of the company. It's such a
You are,
habit.
you are, I think. Yeah.
And so first of all, I want kind of, when I meant that we are here to stay, I meant that this is a model for change, and this model of sustainable tourism, of making sure you're working with the locals, making sure actually uh, kind of not ignoring your past, but also living in the present. And as Anmol was saying, that you can't really engage with the future without looking at your past, that this model, the heritage walk model that was created by Immersive Trails, curated by them, this, at the end of the day, it's like at the core or at the very beginning of the company. So I definitely want to see this replicated, but not like you take it and like just smack down, put it down, maybe say in Lucknow. um, but like obviously changes have to be made, and local stakeholders have to be taken into account. So I want, for first of all, that Immersive Trails starts uh, tours in places where I want to go, and very selfish motives, you see. Tours in places that I want to go, because it's very hard to find experiences like these other than metropolitan cities. Like it's only maybe in New York or in London that you can find something that's as in depth, as involved, as engaged as this. So the tourism part is definitely an important part that I want to see everywhere, sustainably in the near future. But I also really want there to be, like when you said Immersive Trails Academy, I want there to be something for people. A lot of my friends keep asking me, so we kind of want to change streams. How do we go about that? What do we do to get some practical experience? I really like what you're doing. I don't feel confident enough to do what you're doing. How did you do this? And there are so many questions. It's hard to answer everyone about it. And honestly, we have a lot of organizations who take care of students who want to do like a fixed discipline. Like I want to do engineering, and I want to be do an MTech, and I want to do a PhD after that, and a postdoc after that. So streamlined, so kind of facilitated. And then for social sciences and especially humanities, I found it really difficult to actually um, kind of merge what my past experiences were, and then be able to formulate, hey, I want to work with this person, I want to work on this project. So I want Immersive Trails Academy to maybe like foster new projects and like foster new students who want to do things but don't have the resources. Like we are severely lacking in resources, I would say, for students who are kind of this in this in between stage. I don't want people to give up on their dreams, kind of a deal, and I want Immersive Trails to like kind of help us with that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Preetha. And what about you, Anmol?
Yes, so I think as Preeta mentioned, of course, I do want, I do want us to kind of expand globally, and it's in a sense just to create, a very good network wherein we are able to promote sustainable tourism and just conscious tourism, and we do away with this, with this idea of just a general idea that people already have of tourism now, like mainstream tourism. I feel like that needs to be done away with. It needs to be sustainable to the local communities and all of that. So that definitely. But on a personal front, especially with the kind of documentation projects that we are doing currently, I hope that we are able to carry forward just a step further from the documentation and actually really work towards conserving some space which is dying down in not only in Kolkata, maybe in the rest of Bengal or anywhere else in India. So essentially, I'm just trying to hint towards the fact that I hope that we get to work on some sort of a conservation project, like an architectural conservation or something like that, of a structure, of a space, something like that. Because, of course, documentation is the first step, and we are doing quite a bit of that. But I feel like carrying forward on that documentation and actually bringing out something concrete in the right manner is very, very important. So I'm hoping that we do get this chance sometime in the near future, and we're able to secure the funds for it, the permission for it, and hopefully, we can do something like that. And then I think I mentioned this in the comments of Tatakotada and Chelsea's live as well. Hopefully, I mean, Calcutta has some beautiful buildings that are abandoned, especially the ones along the Strand. So, I mean, hopefully, this would be still a little bit more into the future, but we're able to acquire one of those spaces for ourselves. And then, we can have this really cool office for Immersive Trails in this beautiful building. And yeah, so in a sense, yeah, I mean, that's of course still a lot more down the line, but I just hope that we get to move past this stage of documentation and actually really bring out what we've been documenting to life. So yeah.
That's great, and I really hope you get that office because then I can finally move to Calcutta and just be like, I want to work out of here. If Chelsea and Tatagata let me, so.
I'm coming back.
But thank you so much, Anmol. Thank you so much, Pritha, for talking to me today and taking us through your journeys and giving us the insight into how it is to work at Immersive Trails. And thank you, everybody who was a part of the live and listening to us. Yeah, and we'll see you soon.
Yes. Thank you, Surbhi. Thank you for conducting this. I mean, it was wonderful. It's always nice talking to Preeta, and it's always nice talking to you. So it was really nice to just have this session. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.